Now let's assemble shot 1. Open shot 1 sequences. First we will compose shot 1 chocolate. So create new composition with chocolate diffuse layer. Let's set background color to black. Now we need to add subsurface scattering pass and specular pass. We need to set this layer's blendings to screen. Let's decrease specularity, apply levels, and move gamma to something like 0.8. That's it. And I think we can decrease specular intensity even more at the end. So let's animate specular opacity. Let's set opacity K at the frame 100 just for round values. And let's also set K at frame 48 in this case. Let's decrease specular opacity at the frame 100. Set it to something like 85. That's it. Also, we need to add reflections. Move reflection pass to this composition. Let's colorize this layer. Apply hue saturation. Turn on colorize. Set hue to something like brown. That's it. Now let's blur it. Let's apply fast blur with the radius maybe 55 pixels. And let's enable repeat edge pixels. That's it. Let's decrease a little blurriness like this. Also we have this borders issue. So let's cut matte, apply channel, set matte filter, and we can take alpha, for example, from diffuse layer. Let's set reflections mode to screen, and let's set its opacity to 40. Also, in specular highlights, we need to add very subtle reflection of NUT pieces. And we can take these reflections from the NUTs subsurface scattering or specular layers. So let's use NUTs subsurface scattering. So we see that we have black reflections because we use background material on this glaze in these render layers. And I didn't turn off visible in reflections attribute for NUT pieces. Now we need to remove these NUTs. So let's move RGB layer to this composition and set it as alpha inverted matte for the NUTs reflections. Now we need to blur these reflections and subtract them from specular and reflections layers. Let's pre-compose these NUTs reflections. Name this composition NUTs reflections. Now duplicate it and set one as alpha inverted matte for the specular layer and second alpha inverted matte for the reflection layer. That's it. Now we have these reflections subtracted, but we need these reflections to be very subtle. So let's set this mask opacity to maybe 50 and this mask opacity to maybe 30. Next we need to blur these masks. So let's apply blur for the specular mask. Let's use Gaussian blur with the radius maybe 30. And let's also blur this mask. Set its radius to something like 20. So we have very subtle reflections of NUT pieces in specular highlights. And I think we need to make this chocolate even more contrast. So let's pre-compose all these layers. Now duplicate this composition and set blending mode or this copy to overlay. Of course it's too contrast, so let's decrease its opacity, set it to something like 60. So chocolate for the shot 1 is ready.